Welcome back to Detroit's Morning Answer with John Anthony. You know, Vladimir Zelenskyy sat down yesterday for an interview, and check out what he had to say.
We are not losing this war, and Putin is not winning. And really, his army now in the weak position. I think so, because they really, from the beginning of this war, they could occupy 1% of our land. But they spend 1,300,000 people. Enough pressure on him, and he will be ready. In any way, he afraid of his society. More pressure on him, and not so comfortable life for his nation. They will pressure on him. He afraid only of his society, because he wants to be president till he will die. And that's why, of course, he needs society to support him. That's why he count on continuation of this war. And that is what the big question, the big challenge for all of us. That's why I'm not sure that in Budapest he will be ready. But if, God bless, the president will pressure on him, and if Putin will be ready for any format, again, I'm sorry that I'm repeating, any format of negotiations, bilateral, trilateral, any kind of, I think it will be good.
Okay. Today we're joined by George Beebe, one of the foremost voices in American strategic intelligence. He's the former director of Russia analysis at the CIA, a former Russia advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney, and he now serves as the director of grand strategy at the Quincy Institute. I think when you think about people who understand this, few people have a clear grasp of what drives Moscow, how Washington signals strength, and why diplomacy often looks different from inside the Situation Room. George, welcome back to Detroit's Morning Answer. George, you there?
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, there you go. How you doing? Good morning to you, sir.
Okay, good morning to you.
Now, you heard him. You spent your career analyzing Russia from the inside. When you hear President Zelenskyy say, Russia is not winning and we're not losing, what does that tell you about where both sides truly stand right now in the war?
Well, you know, there's an information war that's been going on in parallel to the actual fighting on the battlefield for a long time. And the Ukrainians have made great efforts to try to control the narrative publicly, to shape what people think is happening on the battlefield. But I have to say, the notion that the Russians are losing this war and that they're under significant battlefield pressure is just not consistent with my understanding of where things are going. The Russians are fighting a war of attrition. You don't measure progress in a war of attrition by looking at how the lines are moving on a map. That's not the goal. The goal is to exhaust the Ukrainians' ability to put men in the field and give them weapons. And when you look at that, the Russians are making a lot of progress. The Ukrainians don't have any air defense systems to speak of that can stop Russian air attacks. We can't provide them because we don't have enough, and they don't have enough manpower. They've got enormous numerical deficiencies right now, and we can't make up for that either. So this is a war that is going to get worse and worse for the Ukrainians if it doesn't end soon.
Wow. Now, do you think that statement by Zelenskyy, is it a diplomatic signal? Is it a moral message? Or do you think it's a subtle plea to for the West to recalibrate their strategy?
Well, I think what Zelenskyy wants to do is to get out of this war without having to make significant compromises with the Russians. And the only way you can do that is if the West really doubles down on Biden's old strategy, which is, you know, just give the Ukrainians everything they want, give them tomahawks, help them strike deep into Russian territory. And the hope is that by escalating the West's involvement, we'll get dragged directly into this war, and then Russia is going to be in a real dilemma. Yeah. The problem with that approach is that it risks a direct military conflict between the United States and Russia. So although the Ukrainians might think that's okay, I don't think the United States should go down that path at all.
You know, what lessons from your time, how do I put this, advising Vice President Cheney should guide, do you believe, should guide how Trump approaches Putin behind closed doors?
Well, I think we need to understand Russia's strategic perspective on this war. They've got a couple of big objectives that they need us if they're going to accomplish. One is they want to put an end to NATO's eastward expansion. They want to make sure that Ukraine is not a member of NATO, that NATO doesn't put military facilities or troops on Ukrainian soil. The only way they can really assure that is if they get some sort of understanding with Washington. The other thing is they don't want to be dependent on China in this new multipolar order that is evolving. They want to be a great power in their own right. That means they want good relations with China, but they don't want to be dependent on China. They don't want to be subordinate, some sort of junior partner. The only way they can avoid that is if they have some sort of normal relationship with the United States. So these things give us leverage that will allow us to strike a deal that satisfies some of Russia's core security concerns, but also leaves Ukraine at a point where it can defend itself and not be subject to future invasion. That's what I think we need to do here.
Yeah. Now, I know Zelenskyy definitely wants that meeting with Trump, Putin. Why does he want that so much? What does it do for Ukraine and Zelenskyy to have that, what they call it, a bilateral, trilateral meeting? What is he looking for in this trilateral meeting and having all three heads sit down to talk?
Well, a couple of things. One is he hopes in a trilateral format he can drag President Trump to Ukraine's side against Russia. And I think that's a danger. I think the United States needs to be in the middle here, not siding with Ukraine, advancing our own interests and pressing the sides to compromise with each other. The other thing, though, is he wants political validation. He's looking ahead down the road toward a time when there might be a peace settlement. He wants to remain president, and the kind of international spotlight that on him that comes from a trilateral meeting helps him politically inside Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that's one of the things that emboldened Zelenskyy, especially when you look at how the Biden administration, how they did pick sides? Was that a dangerous way of negotiating? Because I don't even think there was negotiations to even consider peace. But do you think that was the way the Biden administration went about this? You know, there was a standing order that Ukraine could never join NATO. And do you think behind closed doors they gave him assurances that would happen?
I think the official position of the Biden administration has been and was since 2008 that Ukraine would one day be a member of the NATO alliance. And that, unfortunately, put us on a collision course with Russia. The only way to avoid that collision would have been to say, guess what? You know, we're not going to bring Ukraine into the NATO alliance. I think that would have avoided this war had we been willing to concede that. And we should have, because bringing Ukraine into the NATO alliance brings with it a commitment to go to war with Russia to defend Ukraine.
Yeah.
But obviously, we're not willing to go to war with Russia to defend Ukraine. So why take on that treaty commitment?
Yeah.
So, you know, that I think was a fundamental mistake that the Biden administration made.
Now, I want to get your take. President Trump weighed in about, you know, they should stop fighting and where they find themselves at right now. That should be where the lines are drawn.
During that meeting, did you tell him he needed to cede all of the Donbass region to Russia?
No, we never discussed it. We think that what they should do is just stop at the lines where they are, the battle lines. You have a battle line right now. The rest is very tough to negotiate. If you're going to say, you take this, we take that, you know, there's so many different permutations. So what I say is they should stop right now at the battle lines. Go home, stop killing people, and be done.
What do you think should happen with the Donbass region then?
Let it be cut the way it is. It's cut up right now. I think 78% of the land is already taken by Russia. You leave it the way it is right now. They can negotiate something later on down the line. But I said, cut and stop at the battle line, go home, stop fighting, stop killing people.
George Beebe, former director of the CIA's Russia analysis. Is that a smart strategy? Is that the way it should be done?
Oh, I think absolutely it is. This war isn't primarily about territory from the Russian point of view. It's primarily about their security. It's about the threat that they think they face from NATO and the United States. That's the thing we have to focus on addressing. That will unlock a lot of other compromises. When it comes to territory, I think the only way forward is to agree to disagree, and then understand that this is not going to be an issue settled on the battlefield, that it will be settled in the future through negotiations and political means. A lot of wars ended that way. That's what happened in Korea. Yeah. The two Koreas don't agree on where the border is, but they did agree that they're not going to settle that border by force.
Mm. Now, you heard Zelenskyy. I played the clip to start off this interview. He said that he believed that pressure, whether economic, diplomatic, or military, and I doubt if there's military, especially from the U.S. side, but he says he believes that can bring Putin to the negotiation table. What tools does President Trump, I should say, let me put it this way, what tools should President Trump deploy to bring him to the table?
Well, the funny thing about that question is Russia's already at the negotiating table. Russia came to Alaska. They are negotiating. Putin has put forward several different proposals. There is a framework that is right now being discussed. There's going to be a summit meeting in Budapest relatively soon, certainly within the next couple of weeks. So the Russians are at the table. When people say, what kind of pressure do we have to put Russia on to get them to the table, what they're really saying is, how can we make Russia capitulate to Ukraine's terms for a settlement? And the sad reality is we don't have the kind of leverage to force the Russians to capitulate. They're ready to negotiate, but that will have to mean a compromise. Yeah. And they will compromise, but so will we, and so will Ukraine. That's the solution to this.
I was talking more about the trilateral, getting to be seen, because I think Zelenskyy definitely wants that affirmation to be seen as one of the world leaders. I really believe that with every fiber in me, George.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. Now, how do you get the Russians to agree to that kind of a meeting? I think you have to negotiate at the working level first. Make sure that you've got the outlines of an agreement mostly settled. The presidents can then come in, bridge the gap that remains on the few sticky points that haven't been resolved at the working level. This is how negotiations typically proceed. And then they all can be confident that if they do agree to this summit, indeed, it's not going to be a failure and it's not going to be embarrassing.
Yeah. The Israel-Hamas peace deal is being hailed as a diplomatic victory. How might that agreement reshape, in your opinion, global attention? And does it create, in your opinion, an opening, or would this be considered a distraction in the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Well, I think it establishes some real political momentum for President Trump and the United States in trying to make peace in these very difficult conflicts. I think there's still a long way to go on the Gaza issue. Obviously, this is not going to just go smoothly without disputes and violations and things that will have to be handled. But I think it does show what is possible, even in the most difficult conflicts that we're facing. And I think it creates some momentum that can be carried over into Ukraine. And I think the president very much wants to do that.
Final question, George Beebe. How do you see the global map shifting if Trump succeeds in brokering both? I mean, the Middle East is a little shaky again, but if he succeeds in brokering both the Middle East peace deal and a ceasefire in Ukraine, would that mark, in your assessment, a new era of deal-based diplomacy, or do you think it'll be just a temporary pause in global conflict?
Well, what we're moving into is a multipolar international order. We've left the unipolar era after the Cold War ended, when the United States was really the sole superpower on the world stage. Now we have a peer in China. We have a number of regional powers that are growing more influential, like Russia and India. And in order to navigate on that new order, the United States is going to have to combine deft diplomacy, including peacemaking, as we're seeing right now, with strong national power. And that national power is not just military. It needs to be economic. It needs to be societal. It needs to be a unity of purpose, a patriotism that helps us protect our own values and security and interests and have influence in this more complex world that we're going into.
Wow. George Beebe, the Russia trap, how our shadow war with Russia could spiral into nuclear catastrophe. Was it prophetic when you wrote that book and you're seeing it play out right now?
Well, I wouldn't claim that it was prophetic, but I did try to warn about a situation that I saw evolving that unfortunately is playing out right now. The good news is we still have a way out of this problem, and I think the president is doing a good job in trying to find a way out.
Yeah. Where can people buy the book, and can they follow you on any social media platforms?
Well, yeah, sure. The book is available online through Amazon and other vendors, and I am on Twitter at GeorgeBeebe13, and the Quincy Institute website, quincyinst.org, I think also is a good place to follow my publications.
All right, George Beebe, former director of Russia analysis at the CIA, former Russia advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney, and now director of grand strategy at the Quincy Institute. Thanks so much for joining us today on Detroit's Morning Answer.
Thanks, John.
All right. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Detroit's Morning Answer. Michael Pack. We go from one war to another. As Trump brings peace, remember what Middle East wars have wrought. Let's find out from Michael Pack what he thinks about the Middle East peace deal and has it been violated? I don't know if you saw Israel allegedly attacked Gaza. We'll see. We'll be right back.